What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Russia is trying to build one of the most important tools of this entire war, a centralized digital draft register that could help the government find people, pressure them, restrict them, and potentially pull them into a future mobilization campaign with the precision of an online advertising algorithm. But here is the insane part. According to the iStories investigation, this massive state project was not being built by some elite Moscow cyber empire with huge salaries and perfect security. No, it was being built by a tiny Tatarstan-based company called Mikord, where ordinary employees were earning around just 50,000 rubles per month, around $700. And one key analyst, one of the most important people, was making 100,000 rubles per month. And after endless trips to Moscow to present this project to the defense ministry, he was reportedly negotiating for a 35,000 rubles raise. So no wonder eventually all of this got hacked, with millions of collected data sets being either stolen or leaked online. And this is where the story becomes bigger than another Russian corruption episode, because we are talking about a system that was supposed to collect up to 300 facts about each person, including income, travel history, and potentially allow the state to profile who is easiest to pressure, who has debts, who has no passport, who is unlikely to resist, and who can be selected quietly without creating another wave of panic like it happened in 2022. But instead of a clean and secure machine, the picture looks like a dark comedy about a collapsing empire. An expired firewall license, vulnerable Windows 10 machines, passwords sent through Telegram chats, a company with just around in general 60 people, salaries from 30 to 80,000 rubles, and even a 200 ruble cafeteria food stamp, guess what, listed as a job perk. So today, let's talk about what this digital draft system was really meant to do. Why the Defense Ministry, the FSB, the Digital Development Ministry, the Cabinet, the Prime Minister Mishustin's circle, all of them seem to have different interests inside the very same project. And why Putin's future mobilization machine may be both terrifying in theory and embarrassingly broken in practice. Here's where it gets interesting. This digital draft register was not created because Russia suddenly discovered efficiency or clean paperwork. This is not about making life easier for ordinary citizens. This is about making state pressure faster, quieter, and harder to escape. The Russian government passed legislation for this system back in early 2023, but almost 3 years later, it still has not become the smooth machine they promised. According to the iStories investigation we mentioned at the very beginning, one major reason is not simply bad coding, but conflict inside the Russian government itself. The Defense Ministry wants one thing, the intelligence agencies want another. Prime Minister Mishustin's circle has another completely different version of what the platform should do. And somewhere in between all these powerful people and all these strategic fantasies, there is just this small company, Mikord, Tatarstan-based company, that sounds more like a company you would expect to install tax software for local businesses, not build a digital backbone for a possible nationwide mobilization campaign. The Defense Ministry's interest is obvious. They want a clean database of people who can be selected, filtered, restricted, and then reached. They want something like an administrative super account over the population, a tool that can scan millions of records and find the exact category of person they need at any given moment. The system was supposed to collect once again around 300 data points about each person, which is where the story becomes revealing, because not all those facts are directly connected to whether someone is useful for the military or not. Things like income, travel history, debt, passport status, movement patterns, family situation, all these things are not really about just the physical ability. No, these things are about vulnerability. This is why they collect them. If you know who earns good money, who travels abroad, who has connections, who at least even has at least a foreign passport, and who may flee because of this, then you also know that these are not the people you should touch first. And if you know somebody who has debts, who has no passport, who lives in a poor region, who is isolated, who cannot just simply create noise online, then you know exactly who becomes the perfect target. That is the code logic behind the system. It is not just a draft registry, it is a sorting machine. It is the state looking at its own population the same way an online store looks at customers. Except instead of deciding who gets a discount on headphones, the government is deciding who is easiest to pressure into this war machine. And that is why the conflict between agencies matters so much. Whoever controls this database controls the process. The Defense Ministry wants access, reach, and automation. The FSB looks at the same tool and sees danger, because if such a giant database exists, it can leak, it can be sold, it can be searched, and it can create political problems when the wrong people suddenly get caught by the machine. And by wrong people, I do not mean just ordinary men from poor regions, no. I mean just the comfortable classes, the connected families, the sons of people with access, and just the people who believe that the state exists to protect them from consequences, while everyone else should pay the bill. So before this registry even becomes fully operational, the battle is already happening inside the government itself, because everyone wants this machine, but everyone also wants a private just-in-case escape plan from the very same machine. And speaking about the Russian dudes, just-in-case escape plan, in case YouTube makes it complicated for us, we guys, as you know, have our Patreon, where videos will always be uploaded and also done so in the early access, including an additional chapter in the end of each episode. So guys, if you wish to support our work and get extra content in return, feel free to check our Patreon. The link is down below in the description and pinned comment. Thanks so much, now let's continue. Now here's the catch. When the intelligence services look at a giant digital draft database, they do not just see a useful government tool. They see a future scandal, a future marketplace, and maybe, and even most importantly, a future problem for people who are not supposed to be touched. For example, one of the demands associated with the intelligence agencies was the ability to purge or anonymize records, delete names, change data, and do it without leaving behind clean logs. In plain language, basically what it means is that someone wanted a system where certain people could disappear from the database without a proper trace. And just think about how, revealing it is, isn't it obvious already? The Defense Ministry wants a complete database so it can find everyone on the other side. On the other hand, the FSB then wants the ability to quietly remove or alter records so certain people are never found. One agency is asking for a stronger net, and another agency is asking for hidden scissors, so they can cut holes in that net, however paradoxically it sounds. In a normal country, that would be treated as a massive governance and security problem, but well, in Russia it becomes just another interagency negotiation, because the state does not really operate on rules, it operates on access. If you are outside the system, the database sees you. If you're inside the system, someone may find a way to make the database suddenly forget that you even existed in the first place. And what happens when a system like this even exists? Well, obviously a marketplace appears. Some friendly middleman appears with a special offer. Hey broski, do you want your record cleaned? Do you want your son's information adjusted maybe? Do you want your profile to become less interesting to the system? And suddenly this terrifying digital mobilization tool becomes just another Russian business opportunity because, well, of course it does. That is the comedy and tragedy of Russian state building. They try to create digital authoritarian efficiency, but they build it inside a world of bribery, exemptions, informal access, agency rivalry, and deep mistrust. The government wants total control, but every elite group also wants a personal backdoor, because nobody in that system actually trusts the system they are building. This also explains why the system has been delayed for so long. The Defense Ministry wants a complete mobilization database. The intelligence agencies want deniability and deletion options. Cabinet officials want their own features. PM Mishustin's people want their own presentation-ready version. And the tiny company actually building the thing has to somehow satisfy all of them while paying ordinary workers salaries that do not even exactly inspire world-class cyber discipline. So when people ask why the digital draft register has not smoothly been launched after being legislated back in 2023, 3 years ago, the answer is not just that Russia is slow. The answer is that Russia is trying to build a perfect machine for coercion, while every powerful player is trying to install their own private escape hatch. And people responsible for making all these contradicting desires to come to life earn $700 per month. So I don't think they have their client's best interests at heart, right? Neither the security of the machine they are building. Now this detail changes absolutely everything. The people building Russia's digital control infrastructure are not the polished image of the elite state cyber power that the Kremlin wants you to imagine. Behind the big tables, official presentations and Moscow meetings, the actual work may be done by underpaid regional employees who are just trying to survive another shift. The company called Mikord had around 60 employees. Monthly earnings ranged roughly from 30 to 80,000 rubles. Average wages were around 50,000 rubles, $700. And one analyst who presented the product itself to Defense Ministry and spent significant time traveling to Moscow and back and forth, made around just 100,000 rubles a month. And after all those trips, he was reportedly even negotiating for just a 35,000 ruble raise. And this is where the imperial image falls apart even further. We are told that Russia is building digital sovereignty, military modernization, electronic government, centralized control, and future-proof mobilization tools. But then you look under the hood and the engine is being assembled by people making salaries comparable to just ordinary low-paid service jobs. The company even listed a, once again, daily 200 ruble cafeteria food stamp as perk. A perk worth a little less than $3. How about that? For people involved in a project connected to a database that may contain some of the most politically sensitive information in the entire country, earning this. And then there are security details. The firewall license expired, internal resources become vulnerable to outside online threats, employee computers ran on Windows 10 with publicly known vulnerabilities, workers even send passwords to each other on Telegram. And these are cyber professionals, supposedly. Not a serious enterprise, just password system or whatever. No, just Telegram. Passwords in work chats. Welcome to the digital fortress, I guess. And this is exactly why Russian data leaks so easily. People often imagine that sensitive data is handled by some high-ranking executive living in a mansion outside Moscow, but in reality the practical work is often done by small subcontractors, some low-paid developers, regional firms, and exhausted staff who do not even have time, money, motivation, or institutional culture to treat every file like a matter of national security. That is exactly how you get the insane situation where 500 rubles can buy access to information on a Russian citizen, and several dozen thousand rubles can apparently buy real-time updates, cell tower data, facial recognition, camera information, all that follows basically. This is not how a secure state is supposed to function, but it is how a system works when huge money disappears at the top and responsibility is dumped at the bottom. And honestly, it is not fair to pretend that the problem is just simply this company, Mikord. A small regional IT company may be fine for local accounting systems, school websites, taxi company automation, or just ordinary implementation work. The absurdity is that the Russian state placed a project of this scale, sensitivity, and political importance into such an environment, and then acted surprised when it looked fragile. You cannot pay people 50,000 rubles a month, bury them under contradictory demands from 5 different agencies, make them handle sensitive infrastructure, and then expect them to operate like a world-class cybersecurity team. And this is why Putin's system is dangerous and ridiculous at the same time. It wants to control millions of people with high-tech tools, but it builds those exact tools through the same old structure of corruption, underpayment, fear, shortcuts, and incompetence. And when the main goal of this whole thing is mobilization, you just have to ask yourself a question. Will it even make a difference at all? Or will the Kremlin just continue to grab whoever they can, whoever they want, and send into the trenches? Let's try to answer this question next. Now keep this next fact in mind because it's about to come back soon. Russia does not need this kind of system for ordinary conscription, because ordinary conscription has functioned for decades with paper, pressure, regional quotas, and the usual mix of avoidance, fear, and bureaucracy. Since the Soviet era, conscription has been manageable without this massive digital super register. The government did not need to catch every single person, it only needed to meet targets. And those targets were usually met by focusing on rural areas, poorer regions, national republics, and communities where military service could be presented not only as an obligation, but also one of the few available career paths. That is why this new system is not really about ordinary conscription. It is too big, too detailed, too invasive, and too politically sensitive for that. A database with 300 personal parameters is not necessary just to run the same old draft cycle. A system that agencies fight over that includes income, travel history, debt indicators, and potential restrictions is not just a paperwork upgrade. It is designed for selection. And here is a hypothetical example so you can all understand better. They would not necessarily send a digital notice to, Sergey, a resident of a large Siberian city making 300,000 rubles a month, who traveled abroad 3 times in the past year, simply because Sergey has options. Sergey may flee, Sergey may complain, Sergey may just create a problem. But Sergey's neighbor, the man doing odd jobs, sitting 1 million rubles behind on loan payments, with no even international passport and unpaid child support, well, that person is now much easier to pressure. That is the real logic behind this machine. Not one giant wave that sends everyone into panic, but a smarter, quieter, more targeted system. Several thousand digital notices a day instead of million at once. People selected from different regions, different age groups, different social circles, and different backgrounds, so they cannot easily organize, compare stories, or resist together because they simply do not know each other. That is what makes the tool so important. It is about reaching the right people at the right speed, at the right time, and the right order, while avoiding the kind of public shock that Russia saw in 2022, when people fleeing abroad reportedly outnumbered actual records by 3-1, and panic spread through the entire society. This is why the marketing comparison matters we mentioned previously. An online store uses thousands of signals to guess what product you may buy. Russia's digital draft system could use hundreds of signals to guess who can be pressured with the least resistance. Income, travel, debts, family obligation, passport status, administrative history, regional background, all of it becomes just part of your personal profile. And once you understand that, the purpose becomes extremely obvious. This is just a hammer. Theoretically, yes, you can use hammer for something else, but the hammer was designed to just drive nails. The digital draft register can be used for ordinary conscription. It can help regional authorities find people for contract service, officially called volunteer recruitment. It can even support administrative pressure. But the core design points towards mobilization. That is the function that explains the scale, the 300 personal facts, the agency conflict, the urgency, and the political importance. This can become the biggest future tool of Putin's war. And finally, here is the real reason all this matters. This digital draft system is not just about Ukraine today. It is about what the Kremlin wants to be able to do tomorrow if the war expands, if the manpower model breaks, or if Putin decides that the current system of contract recruitment is no longer enough. Russia has been trying to sustain its war effort by relying heavily on contract soldiers, regional recruitment drives, financial incentives, and pressure on vulnerable communities. But that model has limits. It is expensive. It depends on constant supply of people willing or desperate enough to sign a contract. It also lets Moscow avoid the political consequences of another open nationwide mobilization, or at least for now. But if the conflict expands, especially if Putin seriously imagines a broader confrontation involving European NATO states like Baltic countries, Poland, or Germany, then the current model becomes much harder to sustain. A two-front or expanded theater with Ukraine already absorbing enormous military resources would make a purely contract-based manpower strategy look extremely unrealistic. That does not mean a broad war is guaranteed tomorrow. It does not mean that the registry automatically proves Putin has already made that decision. But it does mean that the Kremlin simply wants the options. It wants a tool that makes mobilization more controllable, more selective, less chaotic, and less likely to produce another 2022-style panic. This is exactly what happened with the war itself. The Kremlin imagined a fast 3-day taking Kiev operation. A clean political result, show of strength, and instead it just got a long, exhausting conflict where the weaknesses of the system became impossible to hide, neither for the enemies of the state nor for the people who live inside it. Things like logistics problems, corruption, poor planning, bad assumptions, and the usual habit of confusing PowerPoint and confidence with reality. Now the same logic appears in the digital draft project. The state wants a precise, modern, centralized mobilization tool, but the actual development depends on a small provincial company, underpaid workers, expired security tools, and agencies fighting over these hidden escape routes. So yes, the idea is frightening. A database that can identify vulnerable people with 300 personal identifiers is frightening. A digital notice system that can restrict people before they even understand what's happening is frightening. A state that wants to avoid visible mass panic by quietly selecting people one segment at a time is also frightening. But the execution is also deeply revealing. This is not a clean machine. It is a messy, leaky, contradictory system trying to become a machine. Authoritarian power often looks strongest from far away, but when you zoom in, you see the expired license, the tired developer, 200 rubles lunch perk, 35,000 rubles race negotiation, and the password just sitting right there in the Telegram chat for anyone to see. And the most dangerous part is that the Kremlin may not need perfection. It may only need the system to work just well enough. To find people with debts, restrict travel, deliver digital notices, pressure those who cannot find back, and avoid targeting the wrong connected families a little bit too often. So yeah. Guys, if you found today's story interesting, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, Patreon link is down below as usual. Thanks so much, see you on Monday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims are resolve they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.